So, I have written and spoken quite a bit about the topic of blame after an affair, where the one who is cheated on is also the one that is blamed for that infidelity. And I think it's such an important topic. It's one of those it's very complex. There's a lot of layers to it. And it's also one that really takes an outsized role in how we see ourselves and how we're able to heal from that infidelity. So, with that in mind, I actually have a little bit more to say today. And stay with me because this is going to be sort of an unraveling, I guess, of the topic of blame. Okay, so let's start with why other people blame the victim of the infidelity for that infidelity. And there's many reasons for this. So one of the most surface level is that the cheater is often the ones who are controlling the narrative. And they're controlling that narrative long before we even knew about the affair. They're telling stories to anybody that will listen about what we've been doing, what we haven't been doing, their reasons for doing whatever it is they are. They tend to paint themselves as the victim, as this unloved, unappreciated spouse and, the oh, poor me kind of thing. And so a lot of times people are listening to that narrative and believing it. And so then they will tend to blame us. We also have society that kind of piles in on that same thing. There's a lot of movies and books out there, fiction and non, that will paint the betrayed as the one who is at core responsible for what happened to them. But both of those are really surface level reasons. And I think that the main reason that others blame us for the affair is even deeper than that. And I think it comes down to two things. One, we all try to make sense of the world. And so we think that every action that we see had to have some kind of antecedent, something that preceded it that made that action happen, and that it's a clear-cut cause and effect. And so when people are trying to make sense of it, when this person betrayed their spouse, well, then obviously they did that because of a reason. And it's so easy to say, hey, that reason must be because of their partner and what their partner did or didn't do. So that trying to make sense of the world is an innate thing that we all do. And it's very easy sometimes to jump to conclusions that are either wrong or incomplete. And then another reason is that everybody wants to feel safe. They want to feel secure. And if they can believe that you were cheated on, even though you didn't cause it, well, that means that their partner could cheat on them too. And that's a really, really scary, scary truth to have to face. And so instead of realizing that, oh, this could happen to me too, instead it's easier for them to say, well, this happened to you because you were stupid enough to, or you were clueless enough, or you were self-absorbed enough, or whatever it is. If they can blame you, then they can feel secure in their own lives. But blame doesn't only come from others, does it? We also blame ourselves. And we blame ourselves, I think, sometimes because we listen to our partners. And, again, just like they were controlling that narrative with others, they also are trying to control the narrative within the relationship. And it's a whole lot easier for them to blame us than it is for them to blame themselves. And depending upon your own history and then the nature of the relationship, sometimes we end up listening to them and believing them more than we believe ourselves. So sometimes we just accept that blame without question. We also blame ourselves in kind of this bargaining thing. It's the kind of the if only and kind of this sense of control. It's analogous to others wanting that sense of safety, so that they think that we must have done something to cause this. Well, we do that to ourselves too. We're like, oh, well, this happened because I did X, Y, Z. So then this very kind of black and white thinking of if I avoid X, Y, Z, or if I hadn't done X, Y, Z, then this wouldn't have happened. And so it's this sense of control that we try to get. And once we discover infidelity, That lack of control is so pervasive. And so we do anything that we can to try to regain that sense. And then sometimes that self-blame is actually anger turned inwards. We're so angry that this has happened. And maybe we do kind of pick up on some things that maybe if we had a chance to do it over, we would do differently. And we get so angry at ourselves, so furious, so frustrated that this has happened. And so we turn it all inwards and we just kind of keep beating up on ourselves. And kind of this underlying myth to all of what I just said is this illusion that people don't cheat on loving spouses. That if somebody cheated on you, it meant that you didn't love them enough, that you didn't care enough, that you weren't present enough. And that's just frankly not true. Loving spouses, people that have their partner's best interest in mind, get cheated on each and every day. And so before I go any further unraveling the topic of blame, please know that the fact that you were cheated on, no matter what else, has nothing to do with the amount that you loved them, the amount that you cared about them. So what's wrong with this view of blame? Well, for one, it's so simple that it's useless. It's classifying things into these binaries. This person is all culpable, so that means this person is absolved of all guilt. And that's simply not the way that the world works, even though our brains often try to tell us that it is. It's just painting this with way too broad of a brush. The other piece of this that is a falsehood is that it's confusing our actions with somebody else's actions. Now, yes, what you do or say can absolutely influence what somebody else is doing, but you are not responsible for what they do. You're responsible for your piece. They're responsible for what they do with that piece. All right, now what I'd like to talk about is how we respond when we are blamed. And this can be blame from others, but it also can be blame coming from within ourselves. And I just want to start by kind of highlighting this. And it seems so obvious, but I know when I was in it, it didn't even cross my mind. Outsized pain, which is absolutely what you were dealing with after being betrayed, leads to overreactions. Your reactions are going to be over the top, and that's because your pain right now is screaming at you so strongly. And so the ways that we respond to blame aren't always healthy. It's not always how we would want to respond. It's definitely not how we want others to see us. It's not who we want to be. But all of these reactions are born from kind of this self-protection that I think we all get into after being betrayed. After all, we're feeling so low. Our self-worth is at rock bottom. We're questioning our choices. We're questioning our perceptions, all of that. And so because of that need for self-protection, we sometimes don't respond in the best ways. So speaking from personal experience, one of the ways that we can respond when we've been blamed for an affair is with extreme defensiveness. And I remember responding this way. And in the moment, when I was blamed, it literally activated my fight or flight instincts. It felt like I had already been attacked by my husband. And now I was being attacked again for something that I didn't even know was going on. And so it really did feel like my very core, my very self was at risk. And part of that, though, was also ego preservation. It's really hard to admit that you didn't know what was going on. You feel like such an idiot. You feel so stupid. And so if anybody else says something that sort of triggers that feeling, it's really easy to respond with, I remember it's embarrassing of how extreme my reaction was of, here's all of the reasons that it's not my fault. I was like ready, with all of this ammunition of, here's all of the reasons why I am an innocent victim and all of these things. Another reason that I think we respond with defensiveness is sometimes when people blame us, it feels like they are completely discounting our experience and our pain. It's like, well, you did this thing, whatever that is. And so therefore you shouldn't be feeling this way. You shouldn't have this reaction. You shouldn't be surprised that your partner cheated on you. And we don't like to hear those things. And so we want our pain to be heard. And so part of that then is responding with that defensiveness. Another common response that, again, I definitely did myself is kind of coming back with like a moral superiority of, it's that all or none again of, they did this thing, they did this horrific thing. They have, no morals, no character. Look at all of this that they did. And then you kind of counterbalance that with, what an angel you are and all of the things that you have done. And, kind of this martyrdom, like moral superiority kind of all kind of comes together, I think. And it kind of feels good. When we're feeling so low, again, our self-worth has been attacked. When we're feeling so low, it feels good to build ourselves up to be, this good person, this all, I don't know, just like these good intentions and how could he do this to me when I was at home cooking him dinner every night? Or, we kind of contrast that all of the time. And I think a few things kind of come into play here. One, we tend to, tell our own narrative after the fact, kind of like they were controlling the narrative before the affair. Sometimes we're controlling the narrative after the affair, really to try to help ourselves figure out where we are and what's real, and also to try to self-soothe a little bit, I think. And I think too, we're trying to convince ourselves that we are good people, that this didn't happen to us because of some failing on our part or some way that we're not worthy. And then finally, we tend to respond to blame with this all or none thinking. A lot of times with trauma, we tend to either minimize things or exaggerate things. And I think that happens a lot in the realm of blame after infidelity. And I see this sometimes with people, trying to label their exes, as narcissist, psychopath, whatever, or also turning it inward and completely blaming themselves for everything. I'm unlovable. I have no value. I have no worth. I'm never going to be loved again. All of those sorts of things. And none of these, the defensiveness, the moral superiority, or that all or none thinking, really serve us in the long run. So the problem with defensiveness is that it keeps us blind. We're so focused on protecting the ego that we fail to really see ourselves. And when we fail to see ourselves, well, that's when we become stuck. That's when we are unable to make progress. And so it can be a hard one. Egos don't like to be poked. And so they tend to be pretty challenging sometimes to sort of work around and soften so that we can make those changes that we really want to make for ourselves. One of the things that the moral superiority thing fails to recognize is that none of us are perfect, that all of us screw up at times. And that even though the magnitudes and the nature of the actions were different between you and the person that cheated on you, that doesn't mean that one person had no part at all. And I know that can be such a difficult thing to accept. And depending upon where you are in all of this, when I say that defensiveness might be screaming right now. That defensiveness might be saying, this woman has no idea what I've been through. She doesn't know my situation. And I'm saying that because I used to say that too. But please just stay with me. And one thing that can be important to keep in mind is that when we're looking back, we are comparing their actions, or at least their actions that we know about. So they're cheating, they're lying, all of those things, with our intentions. And when I look back and I take responsibility for my part in what happened with my first marriage, my intentions were good. My intentions were pure. My intentions came out of love. But that's not always how those things came across. And so it's really important for us to recognize that we really can't compare like our inner world with somebody else's outer world, because those are two different things. So instead, if I can look at how my ex-husband experienced some of those things for me, even though the intentions were one thing, his experience was something else, that can help me understand a little bit more what led him down the path that he was on. It's not my fault. I'm not the one that sent him there. At the same time, I was there on the journey. And so I need to take responsibility for the piece that I did. The other part with blame is it fails to recognize relationship patterns. And we all get into certain patterns in our relationships, and generally these aren't good ones. So I'm going to talk about one that's just a widely known one. So if you think about somebody who's like super clingy, their partner tends to respond by distancing themselves and kind of pulling away. And then when they pull away, the one who's more anxious, it's like right up in their face again. And so it's this just sort of like pursuer distancer dance is what it's often called, that sort of happens. Now, we can look at just one piece of that and say, oh, you're to blame for everything. But really, it's those two pieces kind of working together that both play a role. Now, one of those people could end up doing something that is, grossly inappropriate, that is, abusive, that is manipulative, betrayal, all of those things. And that doesn't mean that the other person is responsible for it, but it does mean that, hey, those two pieces don't work independently, that there is something there that is interconnected. Now, for me personally, after I was betrayed, it took a long time before I was able to examine any of this. For the longest time, it was very clear to me that it was all his fault, and I was completely clueless and innocent and, this loving, doting wife, and look at what was done to me. And what actually started to sort of open my mind, I'm not going to say change my mind, because it wasn't a change. It was more of a, let me look at this a little bit differently. Let me kind of open up some possibilities, some curiosity, was actually reading some stuff from Al-Anon. So if you're not familiar with Al-Anon, it is a program that is for the loved ones of addicts. And when I was looking through those materials, I really felt like a lot of it applied to my situation. It turned out that he was an addict, but I didn't know that until after he had left. So it wasn't really that part, but it was coming from, the loved one of an addict. You can say, well, this is their disease. They're the ones that are out there using. They're the ones that are lying to get the drug. They're the ones that are doing all of these things. I'm, trying to save them. I'm the one keeping the home. I'm the one taking care of the kids. I'm the one doing all of the good things. Why should I have to do anything to help this situation? Why should I have to do any of the healing? They're the screwed up ones. And Al-Anon gets a lot into what is in your realm of influence, what is your responsibility, and what is not your responsibility. And it really helps you sort of understand that distinction between what you can control and what you cannot control. And as I was reading through some of those materials and listening to some speakers on it, it was like, oh, this really does apply. It's not as clear cut as I thought that it was. And at first, all of that was really hard for me to accept. The moral superiority would be like, yeah, but he's the one that ended up in jail because he committed a felony. You were, working extra jobs to try to bring money into the home. And then there was my defensiveness of, well, I can't be held responsible when he completely kept me in the dark. But then I also started realizing, oh, wait, maybe there was something that I can change so that going forward, I'm not as likely to be kept in the dark. And oh, wait, maybe kind of the energy that I had about that, making sure that extra money was coming in and all of that, maybe some of that comes down to some martyrdom stuff that, ooh, yeah, I don't really like how that looks. Maybe that's something that I can address. And so eventually that defensiveness actually turned to almost like an empowerment when I started looking into this a little bit more, because it was like, it took me from this place of all of these things happened to me to, wait, here are some things that I can identify, that I can change, that I can control, that I can improve in myself. And now none of those are going to guarantee that this never happens to me again. But that's okay, because I know I'll be okay. And all of those changes that I can make are going to make me a better person. And you know what? That's a pretty good feeling. Okay, so I know that was kind of rambly and a little bit all over the place. Sorry, that's kind of where I am right now. I just want to end with one thing. The blame is going to come. So just kind of like steel yourself for that. It happens. And also that being able to soften that defensiveness, being able to kind of dig into what is your responsibility and what isn't your responsibility, those things really need to be done on your own timeline. If somebody else is telling you that you need to take responsibility, it generally doesn't work very well, because that's when that defensiveness will spark right back up again. It needs to be when you're ready. And I think that's going to sometimes be when your self-confidence is a little bit higher, so that you are able to really take kind of that hard look at yourself and know that at your core, you're a good person, that you're a lovable person, that you're a worthy person, and that accepting that you screwed up or that maybe you didn't handle this thing as well as you could have, and that, oh, maybe, that I would change this going forward, isn't a threat to who you are. It's just an admission of that you're human, and we're all just trying to figure this out as we go along.